All right. Welcome to Rich Conversations. This is a special episode for a number of reasons. I'm not in my usual setup. I'm in my friend Justina's, her place. So we have lots of plants and we have a lot of lighting, and you guys will probably hear some like trains in the background. We're right by some train tracks, and we have a couple cats that might make an appearance. It looks like Sunny is already lying down in view. But I'm excited for today's guest. We have three guests today, and we're going to talk a lot about mineral engineering, a lot of words that I'm unfamiliar with, but I hope to be more familiar with by the end of the show. All the way from Istanbul, we have. Now I'm going to get the names wrong again. Okay.
Yes.
Mehya.
Maya.
Yes.
Mehya.
Maryam and I messed it up.
You were close.
Yeah. So my name's Mehya.
Maryam.
And Mubashir.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. Why don't you guys give a brief introduction about you guys and what you do?
Sure. Actually, I'd like to begin with, we are all siblings, so that's very interesting. We are all.
It's very interesting.
Yes.
You guys are all like in the same field, and
yes, exactly. So we are all gemologists, and we are all also materials and metallurgical engineers. So that's very exciting because we are all in the same field.
We usually talk about materials all the time.
Yes.
Now, when you say materials,
you
say materials, what do you mean by materials?
Oh, that's a very good question. Everything that exists
is material.
It's a kind of a material.
That's the beauty of materials engineering and material science. It's all around us. It's so intertwined with who we are as a species that it's just indispensable. Everything we are, everything that surrounds us.
Everything,
Everything is some kind of material.
Wow.
There's actually a very beautiful book, Stuff Matters. Who was the author? It was an Oxford professor. I've forgotten the author's name. But the book is really spot on because it goes on about the idea of materials from a different perspective and talks about all of these different ages which brought us where we are. I think it's a very beautiful perspective of
and also it describes materials in such a simple language that you don't have to be a materials engineer to understand the different kinds of materials. So it's actually very interesting. We do recommend it very much.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. So that's a book to check out for sure. Before we get into all of this, I'm so curious about Istanbul. Can you guys, how long have you guys lived there? What is the vibe like? It seems so enchanting. A lot of people I talk to, they want to go to Istanbul in their lives and visit it.
If you haven't visited Istanbul once, at least in your life, you have missed out so much, in my opinion.
It's so enchanting, as you've already said. So we have been here for about 7 years now.
Yeah. It's a very special city. It's a very magical combination of East and West. And, the city is already on two continents. So we have a bridge.
We can see the other continent right in front of us.
And that's actually, it has a lot to do with how the city behaves. From one side, it has got a very Asian feel to it. But on the other side, it's right on the, the beginning of the European continent. So it's a very interesting mix throughout history. Just think about it. The city has such an immense contrast. We have sites which were built by the Roman Empire.
And then next to it, we have a very new skyscraper.
Yeah,
so that's interesting.
It's a very historical city, but at the same time, a modern city, a metropolitan, and yet a sites where you can find remains of the Constantinople still alive.
Wow,
it's really interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. So what is that like on like a daily basis? Like, what are the people like, and how does that relationship work on a daily basis?
The people, I mean, in my opinion, they are amazing. They are very, very friendly and especially hospitable.
Yeah.
Very much so. And they're perfect. I mean,
we are foreigners here. So, as a foreigner, we have never felt that we are in a
not
foreign
at home.
country.
Yeah.
We've
Okay.
always felt at home. It's
That's how hospitable they are.
Where are you
And,
guys originally from?
Yeah. So, mother side, we're from Iran.
Okay.
Father side, we're from Pakistan.
So we're a combination of two very different cultures.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another story. But ever since we were by the time of about high school, we went to Thailand for some of our that's where we became gemologists.
Yeah.
And then when things moved on a little bit further, we thought, okay, it's time to become materials engineers, and we chose Istanbul Technical University, and that's what's keeping us here in Istanbul.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's mostly because of the educational facilities at ITU.
Okay.
It's a great school, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see a lot of photos of Maryam, right?
Yes. Okay.
Like in like
You can call me Mary, by the way. It's
Mary?
okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay,
It's the same thing.
that'll be a lot easier for this
My
conversation.
name, the good thing about my name is that it could translate to any language. So it's
Yeah.
in Arabic, it's Maryam. In Spanish, it's Maria. In
English,
Mary.
Mary.
I mean, it works.
Yeah. Yeah, I see you guys. You're in the what are the scientific like laboratory coats? Is that kind of the
Yeah.
The term.
Lab
Lab
coats,
coats.
and a whole bunch of like mechanical things that I know nothing about? So,
It's actually very fun. I mean, we do experiments all the time. We are in the
Yeah.
lab constantly. It's so much fun.
yeah. Oh, getting back to Istanbul real quick though, like, what would you say are the like sights, sounds, and smells of the city?
Wow.
Interesting
That's very
question.
interesting.
So the smells are absolutely fascinating because the cuisine here is quite rich and the delicacies are absolutely delicious. So if you walk across the street, you'll definitely get the smell of kebabs and different kinds of
chestnuts roasting.
roasted chestnuts, and you will have the
Turkish
great
coffee, by the way.
Yes, Turkish coffee, and then you'll have the sense of fresh baked goods, and then there's so much aromas going out in the air.
Istanbul is very interesting. In all of the cities that we have been to, Istanbul is very special in terms of the number of restaurants by the roadside. There are just so many restaurants by the roadside, and that just gives the entire city it makes it a huge restaurant house.
Yeah, actually,
and
it gives such a beautiful atmosphere. It's positive. It's very nice to experience.
Especially right across the Strait of Bosphorus.
Yeah.
So by there are almost an endless array of all of these different scents coming, and then on one side you have when walking across the Strait of Bosphorus, there are always these fishermen.
Yeah.
Who are getting their fish right fresh from the sea, and then they're making fish kebabs
right there spot.
And that has a special. I mean, it's such a interesting. Just because even if it's just for the food, I highly recommend visiting Istanbul.
Wow.
So actually, the food is also affected by the geographical position of the city, because you can see different cuisines mixed up all together, forming a different new tastes, and it's truly inspiring, actually.
Especially for chefs.
Yeah, I want to visit just after learning about that.
Yeah, definitely.
We look forward to your visit.
Yeah. So if someone were to visit for like a few days, what would you recommend them doing?
Well, there is so much to do.
A few days won't do it. Yeah.
So anything you're probably into, I'm sure Istanbul has.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend the Rumeli Hisar. I mean, that's beautiful. It's such an old landmark, and it's in the middle of the city, so it's right in Bebek, I think. It's very close to It's like right in the middle of the city. So
it's got so much history.
Yes.
Actually, it depends on the kind of person who's visiting. If
Yeah.
Istanbul has it all. I mean, if you are into historical sites, I mean, like
which
there
I
are so
definitely
many
am.
palaces. Yeah, there are so many palaces built by the Ottomans, and then there are also, I mean, amazing landmarks.
So many museums,
so many
very interesting
museums,
museums. Like, for
yeah.
example, if you're into gems or jewelry, like us, then the Topkapı Saray, like that's one of the palaces, which is now a kind of a museum that has all of these from the Ottoman era. That has all of these amazing jewels of the past, which are there. So Topkapı Saray, I think, is one of the top.
Absolutely.
So that's got to be your favorite one, hey, with all the gems in it.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But the other side, again, Istanbul is full of a contrast. So from one side, it's that kind of a rich history, but from the other side, it's the food culture, and then from the other side, it's the modern part of the city where you have all of these huge brand type malls, and and it's all here. I think anyone
you
who's
can
looking
also
for,
find amazing natural beauties here. So there are so many botanical gardens in Ataturk Abaratomo. It's one of the most beautiful gardens I've seen. So it's has many different species of plants, and I would highly recommend someone to visit when they're here.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the city is very easy to navigate. And I mean, there is the subway going all across the city, and then there is the public transport is pretty comprehensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course there's the transportation through the sea.
Oh,
so we have these huge ferry boats going all across.
From one continent to another.
In just 5 minutes.
It sounds like it's like one of the most unique cities in the world, for sure. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I'll
definitely,
say so.
Wow.
Definitely.
Well, then I guess transitioning now into a little bit of science. What originally sparked your interest in mining, materials engineering, gemology? How did that all begin?
Wow, that's
a very long story. So
I got time.
Our parents are both medical doctors. So my father is a chest specialist. I mean, our father is a chest specialist, and our mother is a gynecologist. For some time, I mean, after they got retired from their profession, they found gemstones to be a fascinating field. And then they started to, get into the business of gemstones as a hobby. Over time, it turned into a little bit more than a hobby. And, one of the capitals of the gemstone trade is Thailand. And so we went to Thailand for about 4 years. And we were in this very small town close to the Cambodian border. It's the town of Chantaburi. And that's where... By
the way, you should visit there too.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the most remarkable places on the planet because like more than 90% of the world's ruby is traded from that city. I mean, any ruby that you see anywhere on the planet, it's very likely that somewhere along its path, it was in Chantaburi. So
really?
It's a huge place. Yeah, that's the world capital of ruby and sapphire, I would say. So over there, it's impossible to be there and not get
acquainted.
Not just acquainted. I'm getting a huge passion for the gemstones, and our passion is ignited. So we went into gemology, but then we realized, gemology is such an interdisciplinary subject. From one side, you have the gemstones and the art of jewelry making and all of that rich art and geology into it. But then on the other side, you have a lot of physics and material science again into the subject.
Mining,
from the other side, you have mining and geology, and it's pretty much impossible to
separate
pinpoint a specific field for gemology. So we thought, okay, if we want to get deeper into gemology, we better get ourselves acquainted with some of those subcategories of it. So that's where our initial spark of material science came, because it's got a lot of material science in it as well. So we all started with material science here at ITU in Istanbul, and then I started to do an additional degree in physics. Mehya did it in geology, Maryam in mining engineering. So
you're trying to cover it all.
Yeah, it's such a remarkable journey. I mean, at least for us, it's a lot of fun, because every day we learn new things, new ideas.
Absolutely.
And it's just a developing story as we go.
Yeah. So
that's our.
did you guys all get interested all at once? And you guys are like, hey, we should.
Yeah, actually.
You guys must be pretty close then, as far as like you
We
enjoy
are.
each other, and yeah, very close.
Yes.
So you're like, okay,
And perhaps-
I'll take physics. You take gemology. You take mining.
That's just how it goes.
Exactly. That's pretty much how it happened.
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly.
Yeah.
I was trying to do like a little bit of preliminary research, and there's a lot of those different terms that I don't know much about. And you have the mining, and then like the physics, and then gemology, and like how it all goes together. What would you say are some basic facts about your science and industry that everyone should know?
Oh.
This is a very interesting question. So, to make it a broader point of perspective, let's look at it from the materials perspective. Maybe girls will
start with
have
materials.
a different. Maybe from a materials perspective, it's worth noting something very interesting. So, let's look at the historical eras that we have had.
Yeah,
So
they're
for example,
all divided into different material groups, actually. So there's Bronze Age, Iron Age, Stone Age.
So look, it's very interesting. We term our eras by the materials that was used at the time, right?
Yeah.
So now some people call this era like the silicon era, like because a lot of our information-based technologies are based on silicon. But the interesting part is that, a logical question is, how much of the materials world has been discovered to this day? So given that as we invent new materials, it has such a profound impact on our civilizations. So how much of a new developments can we expect going on? So how much has been discovered so far?
There is such a opening for new discoveries that it's incredible.
Now, if you look at the periodic table and the number of combinations of different atoms that could exist, at this point, the number of materials which have been discovered is something equivalent to approximately 0.0, and then follow that up by an additional 80 zeros and 1%. So
this is how much we know.
We practically know nothing about materials world.
Well, that's a fact that will humble you today.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, we, as a species, we have no idea what is possible and what is out there yet to be discovered. And now think about the possibilities. Given that all of this huge civilization and that we have built around us is just with that tiny fraction of 1%.
It's kind of scary.
It's scary and also exciting.
Yes.
I mean,
so is that just planet Earth, or is that like outer space too?
Everything included. I mean, there may be civilizations out there besides the human species who may have better knowledge, maybe. But for our species, it looks like we have no idea what's going on. And who knows? Maybe in the future, there may be additional materials that could totally revolutionize the way we do things today.
Absolutely.
So, for example,
in terms of energy, in terms of everything, I mean, energy consumption, energy production, the way we produce our materials, the way we use them, our technologies, everything can change. So it's a very, very beautiful horizon ahead.
Materials is really, I highly recommend anyone who's interested in changing the world to consider materials engineering.
Yes.
Definitely.
Because
Materials
there is
engineering.
so much to be done. Absolutely. There is so much to be done and so little that has been done so far. And,
Wow.
you know, we are in a very interesting era, actually, from our perspective, at least, because we are in the interesting times of being the first generations to witness a change in how we do material science. Up until today, if you look at, one might say, okay, materials engineering might be a new field, but that's not really true. I mean, if you look at...
It has been around.
It has been around for a very long time. We just haven't called it materials engineering.
Okay.
The first species of humans who were making tools, they were kind of materials engineers. They were looking for different materials, and they thought, okay, they were designing materials for hunting, maybe. So that person was a materials engineer. It doesn't, they don't have to have a degree like to call them a materials engineer. But exactly. So think about it like this. Up until today, a lot of this work has been done through experimentation. People have been doing experiments to find out they went to the lab, they mixed X and Y and Z, and then they came out with product XYZ. And that had new properties. They documented those properties experimentally, and then it all went on. And maybe that material was useful in some area, so they wrote an article about it.
Or maybe it wasn't. I mean, it was just a waste of time.
But no, what's changing now? The computational possibilities that exist pretty much now that did not exist one generation ago makes the future of material science very different.
And
so
very
is this
unpredictable?
Very unpredictable.
I was looking through some of your papers. I think there's like 10 publications. You had a link on your Instagram. And in the headlines, I saw quantum computing. I'm a little familiar with quantum computing. Is that what you're talking about? Is like now the technology, like we can do way more, way quicker, right?
Exactly. So just consider this. Now, without doing any kind of experimental work,
without going into the lab at all.
You can just model everything about the properties of a material right from the quantum mechanical perspective, just by sitting on your computer and having your computer connected to these supercomputers who do your massive computations for you. But you just define the model, and then the rest, pops out of the equations. And the equations will tell us what kind of properties these combinations should give us. And if that is an interesting material, only then we would go into the lab and start doing the experiments. That means...
And this speeds up everything.
A lot.
It saves time and money, right?
Time saves a lot of resources.
Yeah.
Exactly. And who knows what kind of materials it would generate. There may be experimental situations which would be impossible to do, but since from a computational,
incredibly high pressures or temperatures, I mean, that's very difficult to do in the lab. So doing it computationally it's possible, of course.
And that would give us the idea of what we should look for in the experiments. And that's a huge change in perspective, because once you know what to expect, it's very easy to do it in the lab. If you have no idea what to expect, I mean, it would become a huge mystery. So I think from that perspective, it's very important to know that we are in a different era, and we are in a transition to a different era. Some people call it the era of atomic scale design. I think it's a beautiful term. That's especially true nowadays.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think it's very likely that maybe 50 years from now, we would have materials which have absolutely no resemblance to the type of materials we use today. It's very likely. And that means a totally different future.
And I mean, the technologies that the materials change everything. I mean,
it changes everything. Yeah.
So the technologies that we have, that we are astonished by today would become so much better.
Well, I mean, if for example, if we had the material from 50 years from now, it would pretty much look like witchcraft to me.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure about this, as it has been the case so far. I mean, the materials which we use today would be somewhat of a witchcraft to those who lived 50 years in the past. But this is accelerating. So it's really
an exponential growth. So we'll hopefully have much more interesting materials coming on.
Yeah, definitely.
So that would be like something I know. So I'm here in Chicago, and if you look at the skyline, you have you can tell the different eras based on like the building material, and then all of a sudden you see kind of in the millennium these glass buildings, and it's like, well, how do they make that? How do they keep heat in and what, like all this stuff? Now you're saying another 50 years from now, there could be other materials and the skyline looks completely different than what it looks like right now, right?
Absolutely, definitely.
Absolutely.
For example, consider carbon nanotubes. Now, it doesn't seem like a very, something that could be scaled to construction industries at this very time, but there are experimental works, and they talk. So, for example, assume you want to have so long a monument that you want to, for example, reach the International Space Station with an elevator. So the so-called space elevator, instead of using rockets. What's holding us back right now? Why can't we build a space elevator apart from some engineering aspects with wind, etc.? Just there's a very simple problem, which doesn't even make that sensible. If you want to do it with the best kind of steel that's available out here, and you want to have a pillar which would hold that construction, which goes all. That would be so heavy they would just deform that kind of a pillar, and it can't hold itself.
Yeah. So again, the problem is in material science.
Exactly. So now imagine this: if you were to build a space elevator with carbon nanotubes, at least in theory, it makes sense. It's possible. So who knows? In the future, we might have space elevators.
Why not?
There's just
so much potential.
Yeah.
I mean, materials engineers will change the world.
I think the limit is only a person's creativity, and it can go anywhere. The potentials are immense.
Exactly.
I mean, just like this fact that you're telling me has changed my perspective on the world from this morning to now. So materials. So now we can model. So our time and resources are now like infinitely like in our favor or more favorable than they were prior to this.
Exactly. And this gives two very interesting outcomes.
Okay.
The first is we have no idea how accelerated materials research can generate interesting new products. I mean, we don't have any idea what kind of materials will emerge. We just know that this process of materials development will be highly accelerated. So there is really, this is a golden era from my perspective, at least, because we are the first generation of human species who is experiencing this transition.
This power,
which did not exist before us. And this exists now thanks to the immense developments in the computers world. The science existed back in the 1900s, early, even a little bit like 1930s or 40s. Yeah. The science of doing these calculations existed, but the computers did not. And now the computers
that changes a lot. Yeah.
That changes a lot.
Exactly.
And it's something which is even more amazing is this transformations in quantum computers. So people are now talking about quantum computation. If these quantum computers become a reality, then what we are talking about today will become child's play.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we would have high school kids with their laptops designing new materials. That's a possibility.
Wow.
So it's it would become like a game, really. There's even some people who are trying to advocate these sorts of quantum chemical engineering ideas for high school students.
Yes, educating high school students to encourage them to understand these subjects better, which would be great, actually.
Exactly. I think that it's a very golden era for anyone who's interested in making bold moves.
Wow.
Some people even say the next trillionaires will be from materials engineering. Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
You said trillionaires.
Yeah, exactly. It could be because there is this possibility that. So think of it this way: we have this massive industry, for example, which is silicon-based. Anyone who comes with a very incremental development in the silicon-based industry design, very incremental, that's just capable of maybe enhancing the CPU powers by a little bit, then those companies will pretty much dominate the current, all of this silicon-related industries that we're talking about. Now imagine the next generation of companies, startups, who just totally abolish this silicon age and talk about the next generation of materials which would be capable of doing these quantum mechanical calculations or become the quantum computers. And that will be a totally different era. And the information age will be transformed once again.
Wow.
And the most exciting part is that it's so close. I mean, we can feel that it's so close.
It's coming.
It's coming.
Yeah. And again, returning back to gemology, one of the candidates for this is diamond.
Okay.
Diamond might be the next generation of our current silicon. That's fascinating.
The diamond era. That would be interesting.
Wow. So what exactly is silicon? I hear it more used in like tech startup communities, but like the material itself, what exactly is silicon?
So silicon is a kind of a semiconductor. So what's the idea? What is a semiconductor? It's not a metal and it's not an insulator. So
it's in between.
It's something in between.
In between a metal and non-metal.
Exactly. What's the difference between a metal and a non-metal? It's just that the capacity for the electrons in the material to be able to float around or not. I mean, if you have the atomic bonds, exactly, such that all of your electrons are occupied, then the material cannot conduct electricity. So it becomes an insulator. So, like a piece of wood, let's say, or maybe a glass. You can't conduct electricity through it. It stops the current flow.
Okay.
But, the interesting part about the metals is that they don't have this fully occupied kind of electrons around. They have this sea of delocalized electrons. So electrons can float around as they want. So, then those become the category of metals. But there is a category right in between for the semiconductors, which can conduct electricity under certain specific conditions. These are really fascinating. So silicon is one of them. Diamond is also one of them. These are very interesting because if you manipulate the material in a very specific kind of a manner, then you can actually start to conduct electricity very, very precisely as exactly you want it to conduct.
Exactly. So by making some very specific changes, we could get the result that we want. I mean, it's very easy to control.
You can make it into a switch, an electronic switch. And that's pretty much what the computer is all about. It's full of switches. Right?
It's full of switches. Yeah. 0 1s. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's pretty much what silicon is capable of doing.
Okay.
Making transistors.
Yeah.
But you're saying that there could be potentially other materials that do that job better.
Oh yes, definitely. There is an almost infinite number of possible candidates. Silicon has just been around for so long and it was reliable for so many reasons. But it doesn't mean that silicon is the only option.
Material,
So that's, again, one of the frontiers of material science, looking for alternatives to these types of materials. What else could do this work of silicon in a more efficient way.
Yes.
Wow.
So that's exciting.
So is that we're talking about materials, and now we're kind of talking about like minerals in a way, like
actually we could say all minerals are a kind of material too.
Yeah.
So
okay.
the distinction is a little bit falls apart when we start to look at it from the perspective of material science. I mean, as long as it exists, it's a material.
Exactly.
Huh.
Even sometimes when materials don't exist, they're still a material. I mean, then we look for situations where we could make it exist. Then that's where thermodynamics comes in.
Yes, yes.
Right? So we change the temperatures, the pressures, and do all sorts of fancy things with it so that it becomes stable enough to exist. Then we know only that it would exist computationally, but then we would make it a reality. It's pretty much, I think, what witchcraft looked like in the in the Middle Ages.
I mean,
like alchemy and stuff.
magic, so yeah.
Huh. Wow. So like how many around the world, like how many people are like actively working on this type of stuff?
Rich, we lost your connection for a little while.
Yeah.
Could you?
Yeah. So, how do I explain? How do I ask this? So like, this seems like a very profound thing. Are there a lot of people in the world actively working and researching on these different things?
Yes,
Oh, yes.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I would say hundreds of groups, if not thousands, across the planet in all sorts of different universities.
But I would still say there are not enough people
Yeah.
working on it. I mean, there should be more energy and
resources.
more people put into it, because every mind is creative in its own way. So I would say anyone with the passion of creating different materials or working with materials should put in their energy, put in their creativity for maybe a better future.
Mehya is right. I mean, this is a creative process. It's very much like a work of art. No two people will come up with the same exact material. It really depends on how you think, on how you look at the world of materials around. It's very much similar to cooking, I would say. Look, you go into the kitchen, you have a bunch of constituents, ingredients with which you make your food. It's pretty much the same way. In this case, the constituents are the periodic table, the elements in the periodic table, and it's all based on your imagination. So even if you're using the same elements, you could create all sorts of different combinations with those elements. And that could
also,
be,
the way you cook them would also affect their property. For example, the taste of that.
Look, no two chefs will give you the same food, right?
Yeah.
So it would take really special skills to come up with that exact same taste. It's exactly the same thing with materials engineering. No two materials engineers will give you the same material if they're making it from scratch, and there is no established way of doing it. So
in case they're being creative, of course. If there is a standard, then of course we'll have the same thing. But when we're trying to be creative, I mean, the possibilities are endless.
So is this like
too much cinnamon and the other doesn't? So.
Is this like putting different combinations in the quantum computing and then seeing the results, and like that's the creativity you're talking about? Is like it's
exactly
okay,
exactly.
Yes.
And it also translates into the lab. So for example, imagine even if someone is not engaged in the computational side, but just the experimental side, it really depends on that person's intuitions and the creative process of that particular person for how to come up with the next materials, which would be fascinating. Everyone has their own method. I mean, there is no right way of doing this.
Absolutely.
It's all dependent on how the person thinks and feels and approaches materials engineering. So Mehya is right. I think we would need as many people as possible because every mind will come up with their own formula.
I mean, everyone has a different intuition, and once they follow that, different outcomes will, of course, be possible.
Yeah.
And we should be embracing the uniqueness everyone has, because it would bring out so much interesting things into this world that I'm truly inspired by that, actually.
Wow. So something I'm curious about, and I think a lot of people are curious about this. They see this, you've mentioned information age in this conversation, and we're talking about technology, quantum computing. People are wondering, like we're in this kind of revolution of a time. People believe that there will be like less jobs and less things for people to do. But what you're saying is that we actually need more people, even though we have capability on computers that we've never had before. How does that equate where our technology is even greater, but we still need more people?
Okay, this is a very good question. I think maybe Mehya and Maryam will have additional inputs on this, but my personal point of view on this topic is that as the technological frontiers are expanded and the capabilities with the robotics and all of these increase, sure, the current job market for the human species will shrink. But this does not mean that what I'm trying to say is the current job market will shrink, but new jobs are emerging. I think this is a very good direction that the human species is following, because there are these mundane jobs that we do. For example, just imagine someone doing something that a computer or a machine could do. Isn't that a huge waste of human creativity?
I would think so. Yeah.
The computer will not be able to replace that creativity. That's a human touch. But if we were able to free that mind from, they do that job because of the burden of having to have that income. But if that computer or that robot can replace them in that particular job, and they refocus their attention on the side which still needs their creative side, then that balance is actually quite equilibrated. So one of those, for example, areas where humans will, I think, increase in population as a whole, as the current job markets shrink, will be in the research and the creativity side. So it doesn't have to be a technological research. It can also be the arts side. So the human creativity will
That's
expand.
something that the human creativity is something that the computers cannot replace, no matter how far along we get there. I mean, it's impossible. The human touch is something else.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy how the computer gets greater and greater, yet humans are the ones that run it, right? We're the ones that program it. We're the ones that tell it what to do.
Exactly. That will never change. I mean, regardless of how many sci-fi movies come out,
computers taking over the world.
That's not going to happen so easily. I say so easily because, sure, there might be one evil scientist somewhere doing it, but I don't know. It would be very, very unlikely.
The probabilities are lower,
I think we have to embrace the technological revolutions.
I mean, because the innovations that will be brought about with creativity are so much more different than what can be done with computers only. So human touch is necessary.
And we are wasting so much of the human ingenuity in these mundane works that we have to do at this moment. But imagine if we have an energy revolution, if we have a technology revolution as it is going on, a world where robots take over all of those mundane activities, and the humans become, the free species which can actually sit down and start doing what they enjoy. It doesn't have, it can be anything.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be scientific.
No, at all. Not at all.
It can be art, it can be music, it can be
whatever makes that person wake up in the morning. If we really embrace those things that we enjoy, it will be a different world. It will be a happier world.
I mean, naturally, when one does what they love, they do it perfectly. They do it great. I mean, but when you do something that you have to do, you just do it.
There was this beautiful caricature about, I don't know who the author was, or maybe it was Einstein who said, I don't remember, but it was something like this. You can't judge the capacities of a fish by making the fish climb a tree. Now that's not what the fish does. The current educational system is unfortunately designed such that it should produce these workers for the mundane activities. That's what the majority of the educational system does. And that's not, working for a lot of people, and it shouldn't.
And it's actually not fair to the individuals because they lose their individuality.
Exactly. I love the words of the late Ken Robinson on education in this regard. He was such a legendary person, I think. It was a great
Ken Robinson. He was like creating innovators, or he was exactly. Okay, so in education he was a big influence, right?
Exactly. Yes. I truly believe that if his views on education get embraced internationally, it would be a different world.
Wow. True. Wow, there's so much to think about right now. So you guys have these ideas about the potential of the human species and technology. How do you guys apply that philosophy and perspective on a daily basis in what you guys are working on?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah. Rich, do you have our voice? We got disconnected.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Great. Okay.
I might have just stared like a statue. I was just waiting.
Okay.
I'm not so sure what's going on with the internet today.
Yeah, it's a bit slow.
I mean, we are like on opposite sides of the world right now too.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that has anything to do with it. We need better materials for better internet.
Oh yes. They are the materials engineers when we need them, right? But I'm going to blame this on the computers engineers. Yeah. That's what we do. When things don't work, we blame other engineers.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. So this, I don't know. I mean, we try to be as original as possible in how we perceive the materials engineering process, the discovery process.
Yeah.
There are no right formulas. Every day is. Sometimes, you get the intuition from the most strange thing. Let me give you an example. There is this interesting, huge, today it's a huge idea, the dislocation theory of materials. So it really relates to how the atoms glide over one another. And they create this deformation process. So you see, we can, bend the metal or something like that. That's inherently, it has got a lot to do with the dislocation theory. Now,
dislocations are to say
imperfections.
Simply, yes,
imperfections in the atomic world.
Okay.
The person who actually, the scientist who came up with the idea of how this was happening, the theoretical world, was by looking at carpets. So
really?
So he was looking at these carpets. So you can, if you want to move a carpet, it's very difficult.
Imagine a very big carpet.
Yeah. So what you do is you can pull up one side of it and create a ripple, and then you can just easily glide it over, right?
Yeah.
So that's what he saw a couple of times, and then he came up with this dislocation theory.
He said, "Okay, maybe this happens in the crystals too."
Yeah, and that's actually what really happens.
Yeah.
Wow.
So information can come from anywhere. It's all around us. We just have to look and be original. Don't try to keep ourselves confined to the grand scientific process. I think that's too boring.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we usually do for our research is we focus on different materials of interest, and then we analyze their defects, let's say, and then we also see how these defects would in turn change the properties, optical, magnetic, and other mechanical properties, and see if those properties are desirable or not. So,
or even if it's actually worth to work on that specific combination of the material. If not, we move on to another thing.
So there's also one thing that we should establish, the term defect. So Mubashir, would you want to?
So Mehya mentioned we work on defects. Now, what does this mean? We mentioned a material. So for example, material is anything that exists, right? But think about it this way. Let's say we have a piece of copper metal. If we look at this copper metal with a great magnification, such that we could pinpoint every single atom, then what happens? Actually, there are such microscopes which are able to do this, like the transmission electron microscope. We can see each atom one by one. Now, if we looked at those atoms and we realize that one of the atoms, so they have to be, for example, in this straight line, but then one of these atoms in this line is misplaced or is missing, and it creates a disruption in how the rest of the atoms are arranged. So that's a defect.
Okay.
So inherently, when we talk about a defect, it has a negative connotation,
it's an atomic
right?
Scale, and it's not usually very much.
So it's
most of the time,
actually an abnormality in the crystal structure. So any kind of abnormality would be considered a defect.
Exactly. So it can be like just a single atom missing, or it can be a bunch of atoms being totally, behaving in their own misplaced
or
way.
Even another atom misplaced into this line of different atoms.
Yeah, for
example, there are so many different
like
kinds.
substitutional.
Yeah, so it could be, for example, an iron atom replacing one of those carbon atoms. Copper atoms, for example. Yeah. So that would be again a different type of a defect. So all of these are defects. But why are we interested in defects? Now, interesting part is, in material, in nature, and also in the lab, it doesn't make a difference. In our universe, with the current laws of physics and chemistry and everything, and thermodynamics, most importantly, perfect materials can never, ever, ever exist. You can never have.
You're talking about in human nature?
Not just that, it's well beyond the human
or the
nature.
Natural world.
It's the natural consequence of the physical world that it is impossible to have material which is perfect.
Yeah.
And by perfect, I mean every single atom is very straightly aligned and
exactly
as it's the pristine kind of a crystal. That's not possible. Why is it not possible? From a thermodynamic perspective, if you have these defects or imperfections, then the formation of that material becomes more likely. So from an energetic perspective, it is pretty much impossible to have a material which is perfect. Yeah. These defects always exist, and they are encouraged in the material through all of these natural laws of our universe. So this has a consequence. So we think about defects. Even the term defect, it has a very negative impression. It's like a defect. We don't want a defect. But the interesting part is that a lot of the materials' properties come from their defects. We talked about silicon just a while back. We said that we do something with the silicon so that it conducts electricity exactly the way we want. What do we do with it? We create defects that we like. So there are different types of defects. Some of the defects do our bidding in the material and create the specific property that we are really looking for. In fact, this is so significant that we can confidently say majority of materials properties are not necessarily from the material itself, but due to its defects.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's a combination of these that creates the material properties.
Exactly. So let's, for example, imagine something from the world of gemology. A ruby is red, right? Mm-hmm. Where does it get its color from? It gets its color from a defect. It's that defect which makes that gemstone valuable.
Pigeon blood red color that we love.
Yeah, so this is very interesting, and that's what makes defects interesting in general.
In case the crystal was pristine and without any defects, it would be colorless. So it wouldn't have that natural beauty that we so much adore. Yeah. So
now going to the quantum computation world. So, for example, people are talking about diamonds as a replacement for the silicon. As potential quantum computers, how do those become diamond as such is not capable of any kind of this sort of activity. Again, it's a defect which is making the diamond interesting for quantum computers. What kind of a defect? A nitrogen replacing a carbon atom, and then kicking out one of the carbon atoms, so the so-called NV center. So if that center exists, then it has the potential for becoming a quantum computer, kind of a chip. But again, it's all about defects. So a lot of what happens in materials engineering is not necessarily making new materials. It's all about
advancing
the properties through defects, playing with the defects.
I can't help.
Defects,
I can't help my mind wandering into like the idea of like dating and relationships when you're talking about defects and there's no perfection. It's about making the most of the defects and the properties that you have.
Exactly. Actually, it's a very, very nice point that you pointed out.
Yes.
So it applies. I mean,
yes.
There is no such thing as a perfect material. There is also no such thing as a perfect human being. I think there is a very deep inherent law of nature about this.
Yeah.
Actually, we love this this sentence that there are perfect imperfections, because every imperfection brings us so much uniqueness, so much perfectness into that being, let's say, that it would make it so much unique, so rare. Therefore, it should be embraced.
Yes,
exactly. Just as there are these defects in material which we so much adore and like to create, it is also those defects, and I think in the human nature, which make each of us individuals an individual of unique capabilities.
It's really not fair. I mean, to put everyone in a framework. I mean, saying that this is perfect, you have to be like this, so that's wrong. I mean, we can see that from material science.
So we can gain more from people's defects and properties and uniqueness, right?
Oh, yes, exactly. It's all about tailoring those defects such that they are becoming advantageous for the purpose of whatever it that we're after. So, it's all about defect engineering. We love this term, defect engineering. I think it applies not just to materials, but also to the human nature. Just as much. It's really a very deeply philosophical perspective, maybe, but I think it has got a lot of relevance as to the materials world and the nature of our universe as such.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it's certainly something to grasp, think about.
Yeah, definitely. So we love this term. Even in the thesis that we were writing together a while back, we had this in the cover page. We seek perfect imperfections. That's what we do as materials engineers. I mean, we always look for imperfections which create the perfect properties. So it's not like we can ever get rid of those imperfections. It's neither desired, because if we get rid of those imperfections, the entire purpose of that material, diminishes. So it's the same with the human nature. If we want to remove those imperfections from someone, then it would be, a totally different person. Maybe it's not the same person who we loved.
Right. Right. Yeah. What's something you guys are curious about?
Wow.
A lot.
A lot of things.
So something you're curious about recently.
Oh, okay. So
there are a lot of new technologies that we're interested to get into.
Yes, but there's something that I'm really fascinated by, and it's the perovskite technology. So imagine this: we have these solar panels, and they create energy from the solar power, and they're very green. They have all of these possibilities for enhanced efficiency and limited greenhouse emissions and so on and so forth. It's a great source of power, energy, but it's very expensive. So installation is expensive, the efficiency is limited, and that's why we still use coal or natural gas or all of these nuclear or so on and so forth here and there. The perovskite technology is a new class of materials which might change things. So imagine this. Just think about it.
How do you spell that?
Perovskite. So it's
perovskite.
Perovskite. Perovskite. I think something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So imagine this. How cheap it is to print a newspaper. It's really cheap, right? So printing newspaper is so inexpensive. So what we could possibly do in the future is, instead of using the regular ink that is used, they would use that perovskite related ink and create not newspaper, but the paint that you would use for maybe painting your buildings, or maybe on the surface of asphalt or anywhere. And that paint would actually be your next generation solar panel.
Yes.
And in the past, it has existed for quite some time, but in the past, it was very limited in terms of its efficiency. Now it is coming to the point that it's almost becoming a significant rival of the present day technology, because of all the research that people have put into it, and they have optimized it further and further. And there are claims that it may even go beyond the current solar technology. So who knows? We might have next generation of solar cells which are very similar to newspaper printing.
Yes.
Again, it comes back to our initial discussions. The next 50 years, the materials of then
very different.
Totally different.
What do you guys think about the next 50 years? Like, how excited are you?
So excited.
It will be different, but I think it's impossible to comprehend what it's going to be like. At least I can't comprehend it. I mean, it's incomprehensible at this time. There's so much going on, and it's
imagine 50 years back, if someone looked to the future, their imagination might have been quite different from today. But the rate of accelerating and finding new, discovering new things is much, much more today than it was 50 years ago. So the rate has changed. So we will be observing so much more change. And as Mubashir said, I mean, it's incomprehensible.
True.
Yeah, the compounding.
Something that I think
time technology.
Exactly. Something that I think would maybe make it a huge leap forward is if we get an energy revolution. So in the past we need that. In the past we have had an information revolution.
So that was the last revolution, is the information revolution that we're in right now. And now with technology compounding in our lifetimes itself, it used to be like, what, hundreds of years, thousands of years between revolutions. And now we're going to experience revolutions in our lifetimes over and over.
Yeah, true.
You think the energy revolution is going to be soon?
I definitely think so, because there are two different fronts which are going on. One of them is, of course, this kind of a renewable source energies such as the perovskite and so on. But there is also the fusion technology.
Yes.
So that's, again, a huge step forward. So that would be equivalent of using a glass of water to maybe power a city for 1 month. That's the kind of technology.
Whoa.
It would be free energy. Just as we have free information at our fingertips now, at least for the consumer. Imagine what would be different if we had free energy. I think in the past,
the world as we know it would change.
Yeah.
A lot of the wars would, go away. Lots of things would change. It would be a happier, better world.
More relaxed.
Yeah. Very chill world.
Yeah. I can hear those words backfiring. Yeah, I feel like for a lot of people, we're talking about all this change and we're talking about revolutions and stuff. But if you haven't prepared your mind for it, it can seem incredibly daunting and scary to a lot of people. How do we communicate better the beauty that can come from this and how we can all benefit from it? How do we communicate that better to other people?
I think that's the challenge of science communication.
Yes.
So it's a huge challenge. And I'm really thankful for people like Carl Sagan or like Neil deGrasse Tyson and the likes of them, who are really trying to
science to
pop culture.
Pop culture, yes. Yeah.
So we are huge fans of Star Talk, for example.
Oh yes, we love.
We need more of those shows.
Of what ones?
Star Talks.
The Star Talks.
Yeah, the Neil deGrasse Tyson show, the Star Talk. Where he connects all of these advances in science to the present day pop culture and how interconnected these changes could be and how the future could look like. I think that's a very positive mood.
And you're absolutely right. Right now, the communication between science and everyone else, scientists and the other people, it's non-existent in my opinion.
Actually, there is this problem with the scientific world, and that is scientists themselves are not necessarily the best communicators of science.
Yes. Yeah.
They're busy people.
You think so?
Yeah, they're busy people. They're in the lab. Some of them even, unfortunately, think of the science communication as a non-essential part of their job. They don't think that it's their job.
Right, they're there to do the science.
Exactly. Yeah. And, there is no one in between who would do that. So that's where science journalism comes in. And that's really crucial. And we need people who are really into that field. I think science communication is very important.
And it's very poor right now.
And it has huge possibilities. Just think about the number of students in the high schools who might be inspired
by these,
into moving towards the STEM fields.
Yes.
You have this unfortunate feeling that the STEM world is, difficult, maths.
Especially for girls. Currently the percentage of women in STEM is so low that it's devastating, and it's really sad.
In Italy we have about 30% of students who are females, and I've heard from friends that there are universities where the girls are about 15%. So that's half of what is here.
That's a major problem with these STEM related fields. So it has got a cultural issue behind, and it's not just limited to Turkey. It's a global problem.
Yeah, exactly.
There is this issue that we don't push for the STEM fields, mostly because people, students, when in their high school or earlier, even in middle school, they become disenchanted with the natural world, with the sciences. Either because they had a teacher who was not able to convey the beauty of it, or maybe they just, got sick one of those essential days. They missed some things, and then that just, compounded. And, they somehow, fell out of love for science because of a few, silly bad grades, which meant nothing. I mean,
I agree. I agree.
So it's really a problem
Usually
with
best
educational system.
scientists have really bad grades in school.
Yeah, there was
so,
this very interesting post that I saw from the Nobel Prize Committee a few days ago on their Instagram page. And it's I don't remember who the Nobel laureate was, but there was this note from
their teacher back when they were in school, and they were very mad at them, and they wrote that nothing will come of this person, and he was really bad at this subject, so
he shouldn't pursue science. He wants to become a scientist. What a crazy idea. It was something of this sort in the text from the teacher to the parents, and that's
he won a Nobel Prize.
I think we have to have more science communicators, and we have to have more encouragements towards the STEM fields, so that we can have more of those, we can tap more into that human creativity towards these STEM related, because, you know, even myself, as much as I loved science, I really was quite afraid of the mathematical, or maybe the necessary, you know, it becomes kind of a silly image that we have of these STEM related fields. That is, these are difficult. You have to be I don't know what kind of a genius to pursue it. That's totally wrong. That's really not the case.
I mean, you learn along the way. There are so many nice people to ask from when you need help, and you can just research some through the internet. You'll find so many resources, and the possibilities are endless. Just reading the books. I mean,
it's not that difficult.
Not that
difficult. It's a myth.
Well, it seems like a field where failure is encouraged, because then you just know, okay, I just need to change the variable to get maybe a different result, and I can just keep experimenting to get it better.
Exactly. That's so true. Some of the best discoveries come from accidents.
Yes, true.
Wow. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. I know it's late by you guys. I appreciate you guys coming on and having this great chat.
Thank you so much. We truly appreciate the talk that we have had, and we look forward to your Istanbul visit.
Let us know when you come by.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thanks again. That was a great note to go out on, and thank you so much. This has been so mind expanding. I appreciate it.